Howdy. I'm Grey Pilgrim. Well, I've been busy. First of all, I've been waiting for this. Well, let me show you what I'm doing. First of all, this junk pile that's to the next to me here, can you see that? This is the stock from a Austrian Lorenz, 1860, well, end barrel. And look down here. Oh, this is the lock plate. Are you still working? Yeah, I can't tell on this thing. And I don't know if that's still working. It should be working. Okay, this is the lock plate. When I got this thing, this was completely covered with sponge. I threw it into a bath of solvent, let it sit for a couple of days. Then I took a pin and scratched out everything that I could get to. Took a brush and brushed it down. Finally got the pin out, the spring out. This is the spring. Now here's the problem. Let me get the spring right. Yeah. See this ridge right here? This fits into this little hole right here. And then this little thingy here is supposed to go there, and this thing needs to be cranked down a little bit more so that this fits underneath this. This is the sear, this part right here. And the problem is this thing and this, when they meet, sometimes this flings off of it. If I pull let me pull this off anyway. I'll show you what I mean. By the way, this I was waiting for there's a company called Track of the Wolf that sold me this. This is a spring vise. And a spring vise is so that you can squeeze down the spring here and do whatever you need to do, like take it out or put it in. Well, this thing was not in right to begin with, so I needed a spring vise to squeeze it down to repair it. Once repaired, then I can get this to work right. There was no hammer on this thing when I got it. I had to order this from Dixie Gun Works. It was a casting. And I also I could not find the correct screw. My cousin thought that maybe this lock plate here, see this screw? Well, that's a different thread. But that was what he was hoping that would fit this. It doesn't. So I went through a coffee can I have of old screws and washers and nuts and bolts and pulled this one out and a washer to make it work. And it doesn't quite work because it's wobbly. I need to take this off and put a cone-shaped washer under here to go up against the hammer, and then it'll clamp right. But that's the next step. Also, I'm going to take some birchwood Casey. Well, first I'm going to heat treat this, and then take some birchwood Casey bluing and blue this thing. And hopefully, once it's all done, this will look right. It won't be right, but it'll look right. But anyway, but right now I'm worried about this, getting the spring to fit right on this frizzen. If I can't get it right, I may have to order castings of new parts. And I know a company that does sell them. And I can get a new sear. And this is the sear spring or hammer or trigger spring. The trigger, by the way it works is the trigger pushes against this bar, which moves that, and there. I can't really do it right at the moment. But anyway, this is what I'm working on right now. It's getting this Lorenz working. Now, why a Lorenz? Lorenz was an interesting rifle. It was an Austrian rifle that is made, by the way, between 1856 and 1860. And I don't know exactly the date on this one. But anyway, the Lorenz was developed by the Austrians. It's a cap and ball front loader. And they used it in a war with the Italians, one of the early wars of the Italian Civil War. There's a lot of places they used it. Let me get up here. Okay, there. Anyway, it served okay. But meanwhile, down in Prussia, or up in Prussia from the Austrians, the Austrians were developing a thing called the Dreyse needle rifle. The Dreyse needle rifle was unique in several ways. It was a breech loader, it was bolt action, and it was a paper cartridge. But the way it worked is the bullet was on the front of the paper cartridge, had a bunch of powder in it, but it had some fulminate sitting up against the back of the bullet. Shove it into at the end in the bolt action, push the bolt, and the bolt basically, well, like a modern bolt action, let me get a modern bolt action here. In a modern bolt action, this is unloaded, and that is closed. But in a Dreyse, it looked sort of like that, about there. Because instead of having locking lugs, the only lock was this bolt up against the back of the, I think it's against the wood of the stock. It didn't have to hold much pressure because it's black powder, and besides which it leaked like a sieve. So, and now, instead of a firing pin, it had this long needle on it. And the purpose behind the needle was to drive a round up through. Let me get that. You just stay right there. Drive the pin up through the cartridge to the fulminate on the back of the bullet. Use the bullet as the anvil, and then the needle would go bang into it, set off the fulminate, and boom, the whole thing would go, and the bullet would go down the barrel. Well, the mixture of black powder and fulminate was very corrosive, and the pin sort of got worn away very quickly. Great for a battle, but you better have extra pins to insert after the battle, just so that in the next battle that your guys still have some working guns. Well, needless to say, the Austrians lost that war. The next war that the Prussians faced was the Franco-Prussian War, and the French were using the chassepot, which was another needle gun. Actually, it's a little more sophisticated than the Dreyse, but the Austrians had better tactics, and they won. The Prussians had better tactics, and they won. Blessed be the name of Otto von Bismarck. But anyway, the Austrians had a whole crap ton of these Lorenzes left over from those two wars. And along comes the Americans during their Civil War, and a bunch of Northerners and a bunch of Southerners, buyers, showed up into Europe saying, we'll buy any guns you got. And the Austrians said, hey, come over here, guys. We got all of these, and showed them a whole bunch of these. Well, the Northerners walked off with several 100,000 of them, and the Confederates with about 100,000. And this one, by the way, I think is Confederate. I'll explain why later. But and this is the reason why. Every one of these that came out of that war, they were in absolutely awful condition. And as you can tell, this thing has been through through many campaigns. The finish is just about gone. It doesn't have a crack in the stock, thank goodness. But other than that, I mean, this whole stock looks like it should be refinished. I'm not going to refinish it because I want to leave it so that it'll work. But it looks so that all of its war damage shows up. That it's I want it to look like the warrior it is. Anyway, that's the Dreyse. That's the Lorenz. Starts off in Austria, ends up in America. And this is, in the Civil War, it's the third most popular rifle, at least for the North. The first being the Springfield, the second the Enfield, and the third the Lorenz. And many of these served in many of the battles of the Civil War. But that particular rifle in the Civil War probably faced off against a Frenchman and maybe against an Italian earlier. You just never know. Anyway, getting this blasted thing fixed is next on my agenda. That's what I've been up to. Happy trails.